Okay. Some people are still filtering in, but I figured we can get started. It's being recorded so they can catch up on the stream. Thank you to everyone who has joined us already. And a big thank you to my friend Lumi for joining today. I'm super excited for this chat. Quick intro. I guess we met about a year and a bit ago. So Lumi has done a lot of work in the area of scaling blockchains over the years, doing independent research on fractal scaling, which is the term he introduced me to, and explained that that's what rollups are. So I'm really excited to have Lumi join us today. He is a senior product manager at Offchain Labs, and we're going to be talking about how Arbitrum can use ZK and how Arbitrum rollups can use ZK for proving. So, Lumi, thank you again.
Thanks for having me on. Love the line team. Boris is awesome. I actually spent a year ago, at the Lambda offices in Buenos Aires. So just hanging out with them at the office, working on, at the time, ZK Sync.
Yeah. I was recently down there as well. Got to experience the Lambda headquarters and enjoy Argentina. So yeah, Lumi, I guess you joined Offchain Labs a couple of months ago. Yeah, maybe we can get into that, like your mission, what you're working on, what you're excited about.
Yeah, so I joined Offchain Labs for a few different mandates. So I'm a senior product manager of Arbitrum Core Protocol at Offchain Labs. So my areas are basically the ZK side of Arbitrum, whether that's applications launching on Arbitrum One, or also actually giving an option for Orbit chains to launch as ZK chains as well. And there's a few different ways that we're going to implement that. I also work with the research team as a research PM, as well as Ethereum aligned PM. Get it aligned. For any of the work with EF for L2s and L1.
Very cool. Yeah, and there's a lot of exciting stuff happening in the space. Maybe we can talk about some things like base rollups, sovereign rollups, native rollups, if we have some time. But to get things started, I think it would actually be useful to just get an overview of like Arbitrum and Orbit chains. Like I have a pretty good idea about this, but I'm guessing that for the viewers and listeners, this might be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So Offchain Labs built a tech stack called Arbitrum Nitro, and part of that is the Orbit stack. So it allows any team to very quickly launch one of the fastest performance chains out there. We already have chains on mainnet that are pushing 209 megagas live on mainnet, which is about 10x. Well, maybe I shouldn't mention competitors, but base or any of the other live production. So you inherit the technology by easily launching these chains. Arbitrum One and Nova are also built using the same stack. So today we have Arbitrum is already kind of the home of ZK. This is one thing that ZK teams don't really like to talk about. So first of all, Arbitrum One supports all the EVM precompiles, so you can launch basically any ZK application. We don't under constraints precompiles, and they are like some teams, and they are native precompiles, so they're not like a Solidity implementation of EC pairing or EC add or EC mul. So you can already deploy any Arbitrum application. We also have Arbitrum Stylus, which basically allows you to write Rust or C programs natively on Arbitrum. So Arbitrum supports like a multi-VM model. So basically there's EVM and then there's WASM. One of the nice things about WASM is really, really efficient at execution. So basically things like matrix multiplication or a lot of compute heavy operations improve by 10 to 100x. So that allows you, first of all, 10 to 100x cheaper execution, but it also allows you 10 to 100x more execution. And we already have some implementations of ZK verifiers. So one that's actually coming, which is exciting, is we're taking part of Aztec's Noir. Is it Aztec's? I guess Noir's grant for developer tooling, and we'll be implementing a stylus-specific Rust verifier, Noir verifier in Rust. for essentially verifying any Noir application really cheaply.
That yeah, no, that's really cool. So wait, so that means that people will be able to write applications using Noir, I guess private, like ZK privacy enabled applications with Noir, which is Aztec's domain specific programming language for ZK, and then run that on Arbitrum.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, bullish Noir, first higher level language for ZK.
Yeah, really cool stuff. Sweet. Okay, cool. So Arbitrum One, like the main like flagship Arbitrum chain, this has WASM already through Stylus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's live on mainnet, so you can use it today.
Awesome. And then of course there's so Arbitrum Nitro, is that the stack?
Nitro is the stack, yeah.
Nitro's the stack, yeah. One is the sort of flagship chain, and then Arbitrum Orbit chains are the different chains that are built using the Nitro stack.
Yeah, too many names apparently. Basically, we call them Arbitrum chains. Orbit is kind of the backend developer stack that just lets you spin up chains easily. And yeah, we're calling them Arbitrum chains. Makes it a little bit simpler. So there's not too many names. But the Arbitrum chains also support Stylus as well. So for example, Converge, the chains by Athena and Securitize, backed by BlackRock, will also support any application, the 16 million, 15 million application developers that can write in C or Stylus compared to just the 20K Solidity devs.
Yeah, no, that's something that I know plenty of people are talking about, different execution environments, different VMs on rollups that allow way more people to build apps on these blockchains. We can dive into that, of course. A lot of things I'd like to ask you about, but just like this is something I'm curious about. So with Arbitrum chains, like Arbitrum One is, I guess, the first optimistic rollup on Ethereum, or was the first one. And that uses Ethereum for DA, I guess, through blobs, and it's like a very Ethereum aligned rollup, right? But I guess using the Nitro stack, Arbitrum chains don't need to be configured the same way. You can use different DA layers, different settlement, I guess. You can use Arbitrum for settlement and have like an L3. I'm curious, just thoughts on that. Did I get that right?
Yeah, so our sort of goal for Orbit stack, which is a little bit different than some of the other stacks out there, is really your chain, your rules, right? So the idea is you can really customize your rollup to your own business needs, whether that means alt DA, custom gas tokens. So if you have a token, you can use that for gas, or more fundamental changes to the stack in the future down to 50 millisecond block times, which are real block times, not sort of, can I say the name, flashbot block times. And so they're not mini blocks, they're full block times. You will be able to get up to, like, Converge will have 1 gig of gas on mainnet as well. And so you can sort of customize the chain to your need. You can have different clients from the Nethermind or Aragon ones that we announced recently to get. And you can integrate interoperability with basically any chain, right? So we're not building this siloed ecosystem where you have to pay a right to join, or that has interoperability only within the ecosystem. Using the universal intents engine, you'll be able to connect to basically any chain on EVM or on Ethereum or other chains as well. So you'll have this sort of seamless interoperability between your chain and every single other chain out there. And we really want to focus on the fact that it's your chain. You have the right to use it, to customize it as you see fit.
No, that's awesome. One of the questions I was going to ask that you already answered was about interop between Arbitrum chains, and I was wondering if there's like a rollup cluster concept like you see with the OP stack superchain, or I guess zk-Sync's Elastic Network uses a similar idea. But you don't have that kind of like rollup cluster. It's interop with any EVM chain that you're really building towards.
This is one of I actually like this path forwards of Ethereum's quite fragmented, right? Like there's a very good reason why we went the L2 path, and the reason why is blockchains just fundamentally don't scale. It's kind of by design. Otherwise, you wouldn't have verifiability if you just keep increasing throughput. And verifiability is kind of the only value that we have in blockchain. If we don't, you can call it decentralization, you can call it whatever it is, but it's basically verifiable state, verifiable data. If you don't have that, just use AWS. AWS works just fine. Like, we don't have to pretend that these other chains that are quite centralized are really inherit the benefits of blockchain. So the only way that you can sort of scale that verifiability is by doing this fractal scaling model, which is the rollup model, right? You execute something off chain and then prove that state transition on Ethereum in order to maintain its verifiability. But this resulted in this sort of ecosystem where we have basically fragments or shards of the main state that are not interoperable with each other. You have to have liquidity on each of them, and users have to sort of jump around. So we're working a lot on the back end of just trying to make like the user journey seamless. So it doesn't matter whether your funds are on ZK Sync or Optimism or anywhere else, you can pull those in quick, easily. You can just use an application without having to worry which chain that is. And that also includes non-Ethereum chains. So we're really focusing on the intent interoperability behind it, so that you don't have these closed loop ecosystems that you, like, for example, if you have this sort of central hub, like, customization basically gets limited, and you won't have any interoperability outside of your own rollup cluster. So we're doing the interoperability a little bit differently. We want Arbitrum to be everywhere, and we want Ethereum to be unified together.
Really important problem to solve. Yeah, I mean, this is a topic people have been discussing for as long as I've been involved in the industry. You know, people are talking about chain abstraction. There's, of course, all sorts of different bridging solutions out there that introduce their own trust assumptions. But it sounds like you mentioned intents and this intents engine. Is this something that's being developed internally at Arbitrum?
It is, yeah. So
Okay, cool.
Arbitrum Universal Intents Engine, we are working ecosystem-wide on this. So it's part of the Open Intents framework. It's worked with Open Zeppelin. It's worked with some of the different bridge providers. And yeah, we want to make sure that this gets adopted as a standard throughout Ethereum. It's not just something that wins Arbitrum. We have a custom solution built on top of that that basically makes it really, really easy for any Orbit chain to have full interoperability with the entire ecosystem. But we're definitely working with the Ethereum Foundation and the Ethereum ecosystem to make sure that this benefits everyone.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. I like that approach, and I'm happy to hear that you're collaborating with everyone to make this a more open and useful, set of technology. Very cool
And the
stuff.
standard.
Yeah,
So you
yeah,
don't have
yeah.
different solutions on every app, like different confirmation patterns. Like, we should not be working on these in our own silos.
Yeah, we could invoke the classic XKCD comic about standards as always, but I think standards are really useful. So I guess what I really, really, really want to ask you about is ZK in Arbitrum. You're a ZK guy. I mean, zkLumi. Because Arbitrum currently is an optimistic rollup that uses fraud proofs. I think you guys were also the first to have that on mainnet in production. And of course, Arbitrum is pretty well known for research and all the sort of research contributions, I guess, in terms of fraud proofs and working on intents and all kinds of stuff. But yeah, how does that all fit, right? Is this something that can be offered easily to Arbitrum chains? What are the limitations? What kind of questions you have about this whole process? Like, tell me.
Yeah, so Offchain Labs is bullish technology, right? There was never, I like this part of the culture of Offchain Labs, is there was never a question of whether it's fraud proofs versus ZK versus whatever. Like, what matters is the practicality of what that technology is used for, right? And ZK has moved quite fast. Like, until recently, it was basically prohibitively expensive to use ZK. We saw $10 transaction fees during like when gas was low on L1. Those have come down drastically. We've seen the entire invent of ZK virtual, generalized ZK virtual machines, which is honestly mind-blowing. We did not think that would be even possible at a cost-effective rate a few years ago. So up until this point, basically fraud proofs was the way that you could get a lot of throughput and very cheap transaction fees. There is starting to be like a competitive point to have ZK as a proving mechanism, as an option for Orbit chains. It still kind of depends on your sort of your product, like your business needs, because if you need a crazy amount of throughput, like 1 gig of gas, ZK proving that all the time is going to be in the hundreds of millions, right? A year. So it kind of depends on what you need. So one thing that we're building out, like we want the best of both worlds. We want to give options to Orbit chains to choose their own proving mechanism and then still have them be interoperable with each other. So at Offchain Labs, we're developing 2 new proving standards or proving mechanisms for Orbit chains to decide from. One is we call it ZK Prove All or ZK Prove All blocks. That's your sort of traditional ZK rollup. You can basically you submit your blocks and then you prove every single block, and that's how you move the chain forwards. The other thing that we're developing is sort of hybrid ZK proving mechanism. So that uses the current Bolt protocol, which is a permissionless fraud proof protocol. But now instead of like basically every state transition is considered valid on L1 until someone disputes it. And now if someone disputes it, basically instead of running a fraud proof game or like a bisection game, you basically just prove the blocks up until that point, and then you verify that on chain. So with this hybrid setup, you kind of get the best of both worlds. So first of all, it improves the current bold mechanism, the fraud proof mechanism, in the sense that first of all, you don't need as big of bonds for this bisection game. And the reason why is it's not a multi-round bisection game anymore. It's basically one round. By the time you have a ZK proof, you know that the node executed all the transactions correctly, right?
Okay.
But the nice thing is you also don't have to pay for that constant proving, right? So you could have a 1 gig of gas chain that's secured by ZK, but you never have to actually prove those blocks until there's a dispute on chain, right? Okay. And these are the two. There will be like both of these will have like a multi-prover setup as an option, right? So, for example, if someone doesn't provide a ZK proof either in the dispute or for the blocks, it can actually fall back to a normal bold fraud proof bisection game. And you can layer that with TEs as well, which we're not really talking about much yet. But basically, you can have a 2 of 3 multi-proof system on mainnet for just security through ZK, through fraud proofs, and for trusted execution elements.
Okay, very cool. So, like, yeah, I mean, a couple of things I wanted to ask about there. Make sure I'm understanding this correctly. Well, the first thing is, yeah, multi-proving. I think everyone is kind of talking about this, you know, having multiple ZK proof systems, having a TEE, trusted execution environment for people who aren't familiar with those. And then, yeah, take this sort of like honest majority assumption, or I guess you just need a one of n to be, you know, verified. So that's cool.
Or at least to freeze the protocol until the Security Council can come in and decide basically was one of the proving mechanisms broken or have a vulnerability.
Yeah. So the hybrid system you just described, it's still like an optimistic rollup, fraud proof rollup, but you're basically using ZK as the fraud proof mechanism.
Yeah. Case. So it's okay. Yeah, it's basically, it's not fraud proofs anymore. It's ZK at that point. So it's an optimistic ZK solution, right?
Yeah. which sounds like
And you can
confusing
like
marketing terminology that nobody wants to start using. Optimistic ZK. Ay, ay,
yeah, let's drop bisection and fraud proof from that entirely. But basically, any orbit chain then has a choice, or including Arbitrum One or Nova will have the option to upgrade or to change their proving mechanisms if the DAO sees fit, right?
I see. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, coming back to what you said earlier about your chain, your rules. I think that makes a lot of sense. Like for widespread adoption, institutional adoption, different use cases, different blockchains, different L2s will have different needs and trust assumptions they're willing to take on and security needs. So I really like that. My question about this optimistic ZK hybrid approach. What are
We're
these?
throwing more terminology in there.
Yeah, people are gonna have a hard time keeping up. I mean, I think they already do.
They already do.
they just want to use apps and not pay a lot of fees,
We're still
And
talking about what are rollups and what are L2s. Like we still haven't settled that one either.
That's something I ask my friends, I chat with them about what I work on. And I'm like, oh, I'm really excited. We're going to be doing a RAS stack. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, you don't know what that is. Like, do you know what a rollup is? And they're like, no. And I'm like, have you heard of Ethereum? And they're like, yeah, I've heard of it. I'm like, oh,
my
we don't have
version
to
of
talk.
that is I work in distributed computer systems. No one asks any follow-ups, and
Yeah.
then it's perfect.
See, the thing is, I love talking about the work I'm doing. So
yeah.
then I just have to make sure I don't lose them. But anyway, so the drawbacks to this hybrid design. Like I think one of the benefits to ZK rollups that I think about the most is removing this 7-day withdrawal window, which you need to contend with when using fraud proofs. Basically, as soon as the state proof of the rollup is verified, you can withdraw your assets. So if you're verifying, every block, which would be very expensive, and maybe using a line, we can make that really cheap. But the point is, the exit window, withdrawal window gets shrunk down to the amount of time it takes for the rollup to be verified, or rollup's state to be verified, right? Do you lose that with the hybrid setup, or do you still get that main benefit? And are there other benefits or drawbacks that I'm not even thinking about yet?
So there's a few different considerations before, just to like set up the sort of scene. We make a distinction between settlement and finality. So it is basically the protocol is final by the time that you submit the transactions, which can be in the matter of minutes, right? Then there's the settlement, which is basically when that state actually closes. But for it's interesting. My thinking has evolved on this too, right? So first of all, with these sort of LP-based bridges or with intents and solvers, you basically have instant finality. Like you're not bearing the risk as a customer. There's some sophisticated like market makers that calculate their risk. So you can have very fast finality next to instant, basically, from any rollup to any other rollup, including from L1 to L2 or L2 to L1, right? There is also a trustless favor of this. Basically, we figured out a way to do L2 to L2 interoperability extremely fast in a way that's actually native and trustless, which we're not talking about today. That's going to come in the future. But basically, you can move large sums as well in a fully trustless way. So the concept of finality, and I think a lot of like providers actually agree on this. For example, Circle allowing like very fast settlement using CCTP on Arbitrum One, or USDT, which is USDT's home base is Arbitrum. Basically sees finality as next to instant. The second the transactions are posted on chain, right? There is that final settlement though, and when you get to moving hundreds of millions or billions a day, basically, yes, there is some additional cost from using intents, which is very minimal, but it's existent, right? So really, it doesn't matter for the regular user at all until you start getting to these trillion-dollar conglomerates. All of a sudden, that'll start mattering a lot, that fee. And for that, you can either use a ZK proof all chain that posts blocks all the time, or in the hybrid setup, one of the nice things is the reason there's a 7-day window for optimistic fraud-proof based protocols or optimistic protocols is basically when someone creates a dispute on chain, you need to be able to respond to that. You need to be able to prove that the execution happened correctly, or if you can't prove it, then it happened incorrectly, right? And that you can submit a transaction whenever you want, right? The proving time doesn't take that long, but at the same time, basically, maybe L1 could censor you, right? Maybe they could censor for a few hours or a few days. And then you need the community to come together to be able to basically unblock L1 at that point. That's why you need the 7 days, because there could be a griefing attack, basically. And that could realistically be brought down to 3 days or something like that. But 7 days is basically the safe amount.
Yeah.
The nice thing about...
I have a question quickly. Sorry to interrupt. But yeah, the 7 days is like an arbitrary number. It's just picked like 1 week, and other rollups agreed. Yeah, 1 week seems reasonable for disputes to happen. Or
how long does it take to get someone out of bed and working on a problem, basically?
Yeah, someone's on holiday. How can we reach them?
The nice thing about this hybrid ZK version is the second someone proves the blocks up till that point, you basically also settled the chain. So with this protocol, you can actually have shorter and shorter settlement. You could close it every day if you wanted to, every couple of hours if you wanted to. And at that point, if you start closing it all the time, basically it just functions as a multi-prover setup rather than being a sort of optimistic ZK. So you can actually bring down the settlement time as well. And that'll be interesting to see for Orbit chains. Like, for example, like if solvers have a lot of money on different chains, like will they be incentivized to come and close that block in order to claim their money? And maybe it's this solver like for N block and then a different solver for N+1, or maybe there'll be a market on the outside. Like it kind of tests the market to see like how much are they willing to wait, and in order for them to pay for the chain to be closed faster. And again, from a user point of view, it doesn't really matter. You still have very, very fast interoperability. It's really these sophisticated actors that play very complicated games. Like they don't necessarily need to settle because they're doing a lot of back and forth transactions anyway. So having funds on a different chain is actually not really a problem. So, but it'll be interesting from like a market dynamics point of view to see like will be in the interest of those solvers to close these chains faster.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, it's like markets on markets on markets. A few things. I mean, I guess that means, yeah, say you are a sophisticated actor, you're providing liquidity, you're making markets, you're running an intense engine or bridge. Then if you do need that to be settled, you could run the prover as well and eat that cost just to really withdraw, I don't know, $100 million of assets to the L1. If you wanted it then and there, you could do it yourself. That is really cool. That is
and it'll be like, the nice thing is, again, it's Arbitrum DAO that decides whether to implement this for Arbitrum One, but for these other chains too, of basically anyone that has a decentralized version of the Bolt dispute protocol also gets decentralized proving right away. So it might be, let's see how quickly like ZK chains decentralize their prover config. Probably not very soon unless they implement multi-prover, but these chains, the second if they're already decentralized and they move to this hybrid Bolt setup or to the ZK proof setup, it'll be decentralized proving from day one.
Wow.
So anyone can submit that proof in order to close it quicker.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. And I guess, the whole proving market space is also evolving quickly, and there's a lot of things launching there and different project building solutions. So lots of stuff for you to keep track of, I'm sure. Really cool.
Fun PM work there.
Yeah. No, it's also what keeps me busy a lot of the time. Like on Twitter, researching things, trying to find smart, interesting people like you to come on here and talk about all this stuff. I really like that. I mean, some things that I wanted to mention, and I feel like we've discussed some of this when chatting in the past. It's that there, like, two things. One is, I mean, I'm a little bit of an ETH maxi in terms of like an ecosystem and a network that I think will be around for a very long time, that is very useful for many reasons. There's a reason why Aligned is fully focused on Ethereum and infrastructure for it that lets people tap into it. But within Ethereum, there's like different levels of like purity, right? Like the purely trustless setups are valuable for some customers. Maybe, you know, if you are moving huge amounts of assets, like very, very high value stuff, then you will want the most trustless solution possible, and maybe not trust, you know, a third-party bridge provider or solver or something, right? But for the average users, you know, I'm personally okay with the trust assumptions of using layer 0 or relay or a different bridge. I've barely ever used like the native bridge from L1 to L2 and vice versa. I don't think I've ever bridged from L2 to L1 using a native bridge, for example. I've like deposited to chains, but I've never done a withdrawal that way. I always use some third party, but you know, I may be moving like $100 across, so it's it's totally fine for me, right?
Also, for the intent-based bridges, basically you're not as a user taking on the risk, right?
Yeah,
it's the solvers in between or the liquidity providers that are taking settlement risk there, which it's a fair calculated risk. But I've seen some research papers on basically large operators, I'm not going to name any, that are trying to calculate what is their risk of any L2 reorging, and especially when it comes to these optimistic chains, basically that risk factor is at next to 0, right? So regardless, you'll get the money as the user. The solvers in between are taking a small risk, but it's so small, like a dispute never actually happened on Arbitrum. It did for the EOS, like the POS fork. When there was the proof of work version of Ethereum that stayed behind, someone actually tried to attack Arbitrum from that, and then there was a bold protocol or a fraud-proof game that was played, and basically they were proven wrong instantly. So, I mean, it's one of the insecurity assumptions. It's decentralized, so any one party that sees any dispute can prove it wrong. Yeah, so as long as you have one honest node in the world, it's you can't lie in this game.
That's a pretty elegant way to solve, you know, the problem of contentious state, if you will. Well, anyway, what I was trying to get to with all of this is, you know, something I've enjoyed in conversations with people from different teams, and also just as I've gone deeper into the industry, is like I've come to appreciate that there's a lot of different solutions, like technological solutions, to all of these problems that blockchains are solving. And I remember one point I was sort of thinking like, oh well, like ZK is the end game. Maybe long term it is. So nobody's going to use optimistic rollups, but I don't know if that's true. My view is kind of evolving. Like there's a big market and lots of different users and people who want chains and their users, and I think it's actually really good to have lots of different rollups and infra layers that support these rollups, because it's a big market and it's growing, and it's like the market, you know, the TAM is maybe the entire internet or all of finance. So it's like when people are saying there's too much infra, I'm like, no, there's not enough infra. There's so many types of infra we still need, because there are people who will use this infra.
And you know, so much more scale to support all of TradFi, all of the real world applications that we want, let alone all the new ones. Like we need way more scalability, even if people give us crap for focusing on scalability.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and like, you know, we've talked offline before about like based rollups versus non-based rollups, and yeah, it's like for some use cases, being as neutral, decentralized, trustless, and like L1 native as possible will be really good, and other chains or users, maybe that won't be a good fit for them. So I don't know. That's one of the things that really keeps me excited in this space, because there's a lot of innovation and there's a lot to do and a lot of different ideas. Yeah, cool. So yeah, back to ZK and Arbitrum. I mean, I don't know how much you can talk about this, but like, what I'm curious about, I don't know, the research process, how this is being built out, if this is something that Arbitrum chains will be able to use soon. I mean, obviously you probably can't give a date, but yeah, like
I can tell you we're working on it. Yeah,
Yeah.
we don't. It's engineering deadlines are always fun, right? Like you
Yeah.
don't. Sometimes things ship way quicker, and as part of the discovery process, sometimes things ship much later. What I can say is we have proved Arbitrum blocks with generalized ZK-VMs. We will be talking more about it later. I don't want to give an exact deadline for when Orbit chains can choose to start using it, but we're basically in the implementation phase. We have an amazing research team here led by Ed Felton, who was the chief technology advisor for President Obama. So the research team was in very good hands. We're working with partners to generally like use the generalized RISC-V based zk-VM to prove basically WASM and the Arbitrum state transition function. So that's more on the implementation level. There are some changes that need to be done for interpreting WASM for RISC-V, but it's actually really not bad. So it'll be interesting. Like where there is the design space that maybe we could talk about for L1 in the future too, of whether L1 should be using like a hardware tied RISC-V execution engine or whether it should use WASM on the back end. But this is where we're at. We're implementing it right now. And hopefully we can announce more soon on this.
Totally. Yeah, no, I'm excited to follow along and read all of those announcements. Yeah, for what it's worth, I've heard a lot of praise for the Arbitrum research team from multiple people. So I mean, I feel like you're probably really happy you're in the right place for your interests and you know what you're looking for.
And shout out to the whole ZK working group. It's inside of Offchain Labs, like Mateo and Mario and Victor and Pranay and the whole team and Sahi from engineering, of course, are doing an incredible job on this and have been leading this effort internally for a while now.
Awesome. I don't know if I know any of them, but I look forward to meeting them at some point. Oh, cool. Yeah, a lot of exciting stuff to talk about. I'm like trying to think like which threads to pull on. I don't want to keep you too long, but I'm like, I mean, we can also leave it at that. I think there's a lot of stuff to digest here. Oh, actually, okay, I have one technical question that I will get into. So with multiple,
I thought native versus base versus L2.
No, that's we'll be here all day. That's like we'll save it for another time. I'll do like a roundtable. I had Luca Dono from L2 Beat on here before, so
I love Luca.
I should do a stream with like you, him. I've never met Togrul, but get him and just like have people argue about.
No, we'll leave Togrul behind. He can stay over there.
But he came to mind just now because of Fluent. You know, they're doing this multi-VM, blended VM kind of thing, which I haven't had a chance to look into too much, but I should get him on the stream so I can learn.
It's a cool project, yeah. We're actually talking with them on the WASM side for L1, so.
Cool. Yeah. Well, so this is my sort of technical question, and that is when you have multiple VMs or multiple execution environments running on the same chain, how do you bring that all together? Do you basically create like two proofs of execution and then recursively prove those, or like how does that actually work?
Yeah, so I'm sure there'd be people that would be more qualified to respond to this directly, but basically you run two separate pieces of software, two virtual machines that are sort of sandboxed from each other. And then you have basically, I don't know the official term, basically an interface between that sends like messages from the WASM layer to the state transition function. So both of them run through the state transition function, and then you have an interface that basically interprets the calls from the WASM side into the same state transition. So it's actually quite an elegant design. You can basically write part of your application in Rust, part of it in Solidity, and they can be fully interoperable. Like you could have a completely Solidity-based application, just call a Rust verifier because it's cheaper, or you could have like basically a DEX or a financial application that uses some more complex primitives written in Rust because they're very compute heavy. right? So there's actually a bunch of case studies of how people use Stylus in the backend. It's a bigger feature than people realize. Like it really, really improves the gas cost and the ability to even execute anything on chain.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
this is why
it's
we have
super cool.
dexes, for example, rather, or like instead of just having on-chain order books, it's because EVM is a little bit limited.
So okay, cool. Yeah, Stylus and the WASM execution is something that I've heard about, over the past year or two. Sounds really cool, but I've never dug into it. But that's interesting. So it's like the EVM and the WASM VM are both talking to the state transition function. So you can, that's what I was kind of wondering. Like, how do they
And then
communicate?
it gets more interesting too, because you could technically just run like Solana VM on top of WASM. So you could technically have like this truly multi-VM future where Ethereum doesn't have to force the developer to choose, right? You can build any application from Move to your Solana application on Ethereum and actually get the full verifiability and decentralization from Ethereum. So it enables, like you said, that you're an Ethereum bull. So am I. Like you don't have to be on a different chain with a weaker guarantee or very high inflation that artificially subsidize fees to have low transaction fees or to write the application in the language that you want or in the virtual machine that you want. We can run all of this on top of Ethereum.
VMception. That's a whole other topic, which I'm definitely not the best person to lead this kind of conversation, but people talk about solidity being really bad. At the same time, it's very battle tested and secures, untold amounts of value. And a lot
to
of
be
people
fair, we do
it.
still write things in PHP and JavaScript. So
yeah, there you go. That is cool. Some like newer smart contract languages like Move, for example, right? Could be, and again, I don't know much about this, but I've heard that it's more secure or safer to write smart contracts in these languages than Solidity, and that is a really cool future state of Ethereum, future possibility to think about, like upgrading the smart contract language to something that's better. And it seems like this is something that is possible. So yeah,
your chain, your rules.
Your chain, your rules. Yeah, a lot of stuff to be
your
excited
app,
about.
your rules. Like I want us to get to that future of like we don't have to worry about scale. We don't have to worry about what language we write in. You just like we can start actually focusing on PMF, right? Like if you build an app, it'll run. It won't crash the chain. You can write it in whatever language you have. You can be a developer in Rust and come in. Like this is the future that we need to move into for blockchain to be adopted for
sure.
for like by 7 billion people, basically.
Yeah, I mean, like it's like if you can imagine every large company, every Fortune 500 company using a blockchain for some internal backend operations, you can't expect them all to have a team of smart contract devs who are Solidity experts who can do internal auditing. They need to be able to build their own apps for their chain, even if it's just internal stuff for things for their customers in other languages for this to be viable. So yeah, I'm with you there. But yeah, Lumi, dude, this was fun. I would love to just keep you for hours and keep asking you questions, but I know you're a busy guy.
One day we'll come back on the native and base discussion.
Yeah. Don't worry, I'm putting a pin in that for sure. Yeah, man. Any closing thoughts or things you'd like to share with anyone who's watching this either now or in the future on YouTube? Things to check out. Obviously, follow Lumi at zkLumi on Twitter. He posts some good stuff. Follow Arbitrum and Offchain Labs for updates. But yeah,
I would just add the Arbitrum DAO has grants programs. We have audit programs for the ecosystem. If you're building ZK applications or other applications, want access to the liquidity on Arbitrum or the user base, or just want support as a developer, which like developers need support. That's something that Arbitrum ecosystem is known for. Like we support our devs. We make sure you can build for your product needs through Orbit chains or locally. We have grants. We have audit programs. So come build on Arbitrum.
Awesome. Well, Dude, thank you once again. For everyone else who's listening, either live or tuning in on YouTube, watching a recording, thanks for watching. We try to do these most Wednesdays, and if you ever have ideas for different guests that I should bring on, topics you'd like to hear me, bring people here to yap about, please let me know on Twitter. You can find me in the Aligned Discord or Telegram, or just DM me. I'd love to have your feedback. So with that, have a great day, man. And it was nice chatting with you.
Thanks so much, Boris. Talk to you
Bye-bye.
later.